So, they're all looking for Kim Jung Un. Is he alive? Is he dead? Has he been fired across the Korean peninsula from a ballistic missile site? It's amazing how this little country that never has done any of us any harm should so fixate the chattering classes, even on social media. Kim Jong Un dead, hashtag. Well, we don't know if he's dead. We don't even know if he's sick. The habit of the North Korean leadership is to disappear for sometimes quite considerable periods of time, as much as 40 days in Kim Jong-un's case. But the attention has turned to who is going to succeed him if he has indeed perished at the age of 36. And they throw up their hands in horror that the dynastic succession of the Kim family will continue. It's going to be his little sister, they say, sniggering behind their hands, as if a 31-year-old Korean woman was inherently incapable of taking on the helm of state in North Korea when her 31-year-old brother was, and actually became something of a political superstar, not least when he was meeting Donald Trump. Imagine if the only North Korean leader in history to meet an American president were to have perished before his 40th birthday. And that got me thinking to the subject of dynasties. Because, of course, it's a commonplace in Britain that it is abhorrent. It's completely beyond the pale for leadership to pass from father to son. But that's what we've got here in Britain. Prince Charles will become the head of our state without even having to sit a qualifying exam. Just as well, because he never was much good at exams. But that won't stop him becoming, without a vote being cast, the head of state and the most powerful person in Britain. In the United States, they are equally aghast at the idea that Kim Jong-un might be succeeded by his sister. But George W. Bush begat another president, George W. Bush. Bill Clinton wed somebody that wanted to be another President Clinton. And their daughter, Chelsea, is limbering up for a run at the US Senate. The Kennedy brothers all wanted to be president, all ran to be president. Jack Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Teddy Kennedy. And Congress is full of Kennedys. It's remarkable how some dynasties get a pass, but other dynasties don't. God forgive us if Donald Trump ever tries the same thing. President Jared Kushner, anyone? Or what's the daughter's name? I've momentarily forgotten. The idea that the United States, a republic, can pass on power through families is surely no different to the Kim family in North Korea. So we've got a poll running. Which hereditary system do you deplore the most? A, the monarchy. B, US political dynasties. Or C, North Korea. And I'd like to see what you have to say on that. But never mind where's Kim Jong-un. As my friend Afshin Ratansi pointed out on Twitter this morning, where's 20% of the Korean population? All blasted to smithereens by the United States Air Force. As Curtis LeMay, the infamous American military commander, put it, we killed 1 in 5 Koreans, and we set on fire every city, town, and village in North Korea. And that was in my lifetime. That was not ancient history. That was in my lifetime, and in the lifetime of many people watching and listening to this show. So just remember, when you hear them prattle about events in North Korea, that if North Korea is paranoid about the United States and about the West, it doesn't mean the United States and the West are not out to get them, because, well, they were out to get them before. Now, where did you stand on Donald Trump's bravura performance this week? Me, I've hardly stopped laughing at the idea that sunlight or disinfectant might be injected into one, or sprayed in one's ears, or into one's rectum. I have hardly stopped laughing, especially at the spoof by that young woman comedian, pure genius, Chaplin-esque, using Trump's voice and her actions. Actually, one of the funniest things I have ever seen in my life. But when you think about it, it's not that funny, is it? It's not that funny that the most powerful person in the world is an increasingly unhinged lunatic. It's not that funny that the man with his finger on the nuclear button, the sole man with his finger on the nuclear button, who cannot be stopped from pressing it if he decides to do so, think about that, ending the entire life of humanity on this planet. Not just humanity, but no living thing, except perhaps a cockroach, would be left alive if Donald Trump pressed that button. And in a way, it's not even funny that the Democrats have put up against him probably the only man in America that might lose to him. A man under such serious question as to his probity, as to his integrity, as to his conduct, as he is under question as to his mental capacities. That, I think, speaks loudest of all that I could say, that the leadership of the American empire has come down to a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Just think about that. And of course, coronavirus continues to dominate all other news coverage. The death toll is now simply enormous. It's well over hundreds. It's now into the hundreds of thousands. 1 million people or more have been infected. And of course, tens of millions more have been infected, but have not been tested in order to establish that. If hundreds of thousands of people are killed by a virus, and if that virus sweeps the world in little more than 60 days, 90 days max, then we've got to ask serious questions as to what is this virus? Where did this virus come from? Now, at this moment in time, just like Donald Trump, I'm not a doctor, though I have a bit of you-know-what. At this point in time, I have not seen any evidence that tells me this is anything other than a naturally occurring phenomenon, just like other kinds of viruses. You know my view that it's inimical to put a geographic, still more a political name on a virus. That would be like calling the Texan flu Spanish flu. Oh, wait, that's exactly what they did in the pandemic of 1918 to 20. We should have got a clue there that the United States rarely owns its own mistakes. But it's a legitimate question, given that many of the US athletes who performed at the Wuhan, yes, Wuhan military games just before the outbreak of this pandemic were based next to Fort Detrick, which has had to be closed in the United States because of repeated leaks, accidents, and scandals taking place in that germ warfare laboratory. It's, of course, therefore, entirely possible that coronavirus escaped from the Fort Detrick military germ warfare laboratory and was carried to Wuhan inadvertently by American military athletes. It's also possible that the United States deliberately gave this virus to the soldiers who went to the Wuhan military games. And don't tell me they wouldn't do such a thing, because they have done such a thing, and much worse, as indeed has our own country, our germ warfare laboratory in Porton Down. It is also possible that this was a leak from the Chinese germ warfare laboratory in Wuhan. Again, either accidentally or deliberately. All four of these things are possibilities. We'll be talking to Dr. Francis Boyle, a man who believes that the coronavirus 19 is a bioweapon, and we'll be extremely interested to hear from him. He's not a conspiracy theory crank. He's a highly respected person, intellectual in the United States of America. So stand by for that discussion too. Now, I have said for many years on the Mother of All talk shows, right back to the beginning in 2006, that the most decisive book for me in my political formation was The Ragged-Trousered Philanthropists by Robert Tressel, a man buried in a pauper's grave, a common grave in Liverpool. Only decades later, half a century later, placed in a proper piece of consecrated ground. He was a house painter, an uneducated Irish house painter who wrote this book when he was in the painting and decorating trade on the south coast of England. It's in a place called Mugsborough, but it could actually be any seaside town in Britain at that time. And through the characters of the novel, which wasn't published in his lifetime, by the way, but which has swept the world and been translated into so many different languages, in the course of the novel, Robert Tressel sketches, literally sketches, personalities and things that well over 100 years later we can recognize in everything we see, hear and do. We recognize that foreman, that gaffer, that manager, that David Brent. We recognize the saints and the sinners amongst our workmates. But what Robert Tressel achieves in this novel is that he, from this microcosm of early 20th century British capitalism, shows the great money trick that continues to be perpetrated against us all. He shows that the system we have is the reason we're in the state we are in. And I'll be talking to a man who's even more expert on this book and on Robert Tressel later in the show about that. My last words before going to the break are these. There's a lot of talk, a lot of chatter, including amongst some very surprising people, and you know who you are, that it's time to send our workforce here in Britain back to work. Well, I say this: no worker, must be forced back to work in this highly infective, toxic environment. Neither forced by poverty nor diktat. Far too many of our workers are already working at this war front, toxic, fatal as it is. So we say this here on the mother of all talk shows: no worker must be sent back to work until the environment is clean. All workers who have to work in this crisis must be protected. And if they cannot be protected, they must not be forced to work. It's time for every bus driver, tube driver, underground staff, shop worker, delivery person, care worker, every key worker in this land must be protected against the potentially fatal, deadly danger of the coronavirus. And if your system can't handle that, it's time to change the system.